Hey, it's Kyle here, and you might notice I'm filming in a new spot. I've tried filming here a few years ago with my Star Wars collectibles, but the lighting was just not, it didn't work basically. But I got a new ring light, and also another light fixture near this area was recently replaced, so the lighting's a little bit better, so I've decided I'm going to film all my Star Wars related content here with all my Star Wars collectibles. So hope you'll enjoy this new background for my Star Wars related videos. Today I'll be reviewing Death Troopers by Joe Schreiber. Before I get started with this review, encourage you, if you enjoy this review, hit that like button. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the support. But Star Wars Death Troopers is a very, very different book than your normal Star Wars novel. This is a part of the old Legends, so the old Star Wars books before Disney bought Star Wars. I'd seen this book forever. It's a standalone book. And I just never got around to buying it. I always like, well, that sounds interesting, it sounds different, but I just never got around to actually purchasing it. But kind of late last year, I said, I think it's time I finally read this book. If it's always sounded interesting and different, I want to check it out. And I'm really glad I did. I really enjoyed it a lot. And my impression of the book before I bought it proved correct after I read it. It is very different from your normal Star Wars book. It's honestly very different than the type of book I normally read, because this very much falls, I would say, into the horror genre, which is not a series of books or a type of book I usually read. This is very much a zombie, scary story set in the Star Wars universe, which was very interesting to kind of read or see Star Wars depicted in a different genre. It kind of reminds me a little bit of The Mandalorian, which you're getting a different viewpoint storytelling wise of the Star Wars universe, and Death Troopers does something very similar. The basic plot is it's set on an Imperial prison barge called Purge, and this ship is actually taking prisoners to basically a prison on a moon. So it's several hundred or 1,000 prisoners on this ship with stormtroopers, prison guards, that type of stuff. And suddenly the barge's engines kind of cut out. And as the crew is trying to figure out what's wrong, and they start putting on a distress call, they happen to notice that there is what they discover is an abandoned Star Destroyer very nearby that they're able to get to. And they realize it's abandoned because when they scan it for life forms, there's no life forms on the ship. So they decide, well, let's go to the Star Destroyer. Hopefully we can find some parts that we can repair our ship with and then proceed with our journey. Because otherwise we're out in the middle of nowhere and we're in a lot of trouble. And kind of like a lot of zombie movies, once they get upon the Star Destroyer, weird things start happening. And when the crew then returns to the prison barge, a lot of the crew prisoners start getting sick in a weird way, and before we know it, we have a zombie outbreak. It's very, like I said, kind of interesting / shocking to kind of see this kind of portrayed in the Star Wars universe, because it is so different from what you're used to seeing in Star Wars. I really enjoyed the characters that were kind of the main storytellers of this story. You had two brothers who are prisoners, so you get a lot of the story through them. There is a doctor on the ship who is, even though she's a part of the Imperial crew, she's not really pro-Empire, so you get a lot of the storyline through her. There's a prison guard who is very Imperial, you get a lot of the story through him. So it's kind of interesting to see the response to this outbreak from these different viewpoints and how these characters interact as the outbreak continues. The one part of the story I was not a huge fan of is pretty far into the book. Suddenly some Star Wars characters who have been in the movies are introduced. I won't say who, because it does come across as a plot. It's kind of put forward as a surprise. We're on the back of the book does it mention these characters are in the book. So it is kind of a shock when these characters show up, and I don't want to ruin that shock for you. But I would say that was the one part of the book I really didn't like, because I almost felt like by throwing these movie characters in that we were used to, it kind of took us out of this different atmosphere or a story that we're experiencing in Star Wars. It almost felt like, you know, you're in this zombie Star Wars outbreak, and by bringing these movie characters in, it almost felt like bringing it more attached to a normal Star Wars story, and you kind of lost a little bit of that feeling of different. I would have much more preferred this book just to be completely standalone, have no characters from the wider Star Wars universe. I think it would have been, you know, a lot more entertaining, because basically it makes you wonder if you read this story, it's like, why did these main characters ever mention they experienced this before? Because it seemed like this would have been a very scarring event. It's never mentioned again. So that was the only element of the story that I really did enjoy. The rest of it, I really enjoyed it. Now I'll say I'm not the biggest, like I said, horror aficionado. I do like zombie stuff. Like, I'm a big fan of The Walking Dead. Watch the sci-fi show Z Nation. I love World War Z, the book, and the Zombie Survival Guide. But I'm not one of those that's consuming every single piece of zombie content out there. So maybe some more diehard zombie fans or horror fans might not enjoy this book, but for me, I really enjoyed it. Not one of my favorite Star Wars books of ever, but still a really good read and a very different read. If you read a lot of Star Wars content and you're kind of getting burnt out on the sci-fi element, this is a change up, because obviously it is still sci-fi, but it's leaning very heavy on the zombie side of it. So it's a big change up from your normal Star Wars read. And the good thing is, it's a standalone novel, so it's not like by reading this like, oh, I'm committing myself to read 8 books to kind of get the conclusion of the storyline. This is very much a standalone book. By the end of the book, you get a conclusion, you're completely satisfied. There's no really big outstanding questions left that you're like, well, they didn't really address this. It's a very neat, wrapped up story by the end. So if you're looking for a quick read in the Star Wars universe that is very different, I would certainly recommend Death Troopers. Now I'll say, if you don't really enjoy scary stories or zombie type stuff, this is probably not for you. So just keep that in mind. But like I said, if you're kind of into stuff like The Walking Dead or other zombie related content, and maybe you don't normally read Star Wars stuff, this might be a good way for you to kind of dip your toe into the water of reading some Star Wars content. So anyway, so that's my review of Star Wars Death Troopers by Joe Schreiber. Hope you enjoyed this review. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you enjoyed the review, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I really appreciate the support. Happy reading, and may the Force be with you.